The Atheist Debates Patreon project presents, what does atheism offer? Recently I received an email from someone, and it was the sort of email that you almost just kind of quickly read and dismiss because it's a question that I've heard many, many times. And the phrasing's a little different depending on who's asking, but the nuts and bolts of it are about the same. Hey, people think religion offers them hope and answers and moral guidance and all these things. What does atheism offer? What is it about atheism that is so compelling that I should give up my religious beliefs and go down this pathway of labeling myself an atheist? Now, I agree that the knee-jerk typical answer is atheism doesn't offer you anything. Atheism is a position on a single issue. It's either a simple rejection of the claim that some God exists, or perhaps in the case of hard atheism, it is the acceptance of the claim that no gods exist. But a position on a single issue doesn't tell you anything about any other issue necessarily, so atheism doesn't offer you anything. It's not meant to. It's not a worldview. It's not a platform or a model by which you should structure decisions in your life. That's kind of the typical expected answer. It's also worth noting that this question is perhaps just another form of Pascal's wager, which we've already covered in detail, and yet this one feels different to people. It comes up all the time. So I wanted to take today, by the way, we could stop the video right here, done. Atheism doesn't offer you anything. You're just using a weird version of Pascal's wager. Talk to the hand, move on. And if that's the degree to which your attention span can keep you motivated in the video, then enjoy. There's a bunch of other videos out there. But I want to actually look at this question from two different angles, fairly briefly. The first being, what does atheism actually offer? Is there anything we could say atheism actually offers people? And the second is to explore why this question tells us so much more about the person asking the question than the actual subjects. And maybe we're asking the wrong question. So what does atheism offer? I mean, I don't believe in a lot of different things. What does not believing in those things offer me? It's not like a positive position where I'm convinced that this is the truth and therefore there are a lot of things that stem from that. It is the case of not being convinced of something. So what could that possibly offer? The first thing that it offers is kind of obvious. If you're not convinced of any particular religious foundation, well, you don't have to go to church. But that seems kind of glib. Hey, your Sunday mornings are now free, or if you had abandoned Judaism, your Saturdays are now free, etc. Boy, that seems kind of trivial and glib. What's it hurt if somebody spends their Sunday doing this? But the truth is, what it offers you, by not being bound to religious dogma, religious traditions, that means you're not spending your time and effort on those things. You're not praying, and that leaves you open to perhaps think about what are better solutions to a problem than prayer. You're not donating your money to churches and religious organizations. And if you are, you've made a conscious decision that those organizations are doing something that is good and in the public interest, and you're not merely doing it because you are convinced that God wants you to donate 10 or 20% of your earnings to a particular religious organization. Now, this has nothing to do with whether or not there's a God, or even whether or not you should believe there's a God. But there is something about being a non-believer, not rejecting religion, that offers non-trivial benefits. And it's not just all about your pocketbook or how you're spending your time, although I would say neither of those are particularly trivial. It also affects what sort of thinking goes on when you have to deal with situations. If someone is injured or hurt or dying and you don't have the platitudes and the I'll pray for you and it's all part of God's plan and all this other stuff that often comes from people with a religious mindset, that encourages you to think about, what does this actually mean to me? What can I say about this? How could I potentially help? What is it that you need done during this troubling time, rather than just, I'm going to bring you a casserole and say a prayer? Perhaps you need someone to help with the kids while you take time to deal with other issues. Who knows? But the way to find out how to better help people is to not begin by assuming that you already know how to help people. And if you've bought into a particular religious mindset that says the best things that you can do for people are pray and, offer your services and tell them what you think God has to say or what you think the religious or spiritual significance of these events are, once you've removed those, you are now open to finding the right answers. And the right answer may be what religion is actually offering, but religion as a foundation can't justify this. If you don't accept the claim that a God exists, if you're a non-theist and you're not buying into religious dogma from any of those particular religions, it encourages you to explore the world, to take personal responsibility. I just got an email from another person that says atheism saved his life. He was in a particularly difficult time in his life where he was even considering suicide, and he reflected on how that would affect the people he cared about. And that encouraged him to take responsibility for his life, to change the way things work, to not commit suicide, and to further engage with the people in his life that he cared about. Now, is it possible that had he believed in God, he wouldn't have gotten anywhere near that scenario? Sure. But also, by not having the crutch of religious beliefs or gods to lean on, he was able to look at the world as objectively as possible without the bias and baggage of you need to look at the entire universe through the lens of the Holy Spirit or through what God wants and expects from you. And look at the world and say, what do I want? What do I expect? I care about people. How is what I'm doing or about to do going to affect those people? If you don't have the baggage of religious belief, if you don't have the bias, it allows you to have thought processes that are much more clear. Perhaps one of the strongest benefits of atheism is the opportunity to honestly seek the truth by eliminating the bias that comes from the supernatural and the God claims. Now what that does is it doesn't put you in this negative space that so many religious, you just want to sin, you don't want anything to do with God, and so you're going to go find the answers, and you are necessarily saying, there is no God, there could be no God, and so I can't use that as an explanation. That's not the case. Atheism, the position of not accepting that a God exists, does not mean there is no possibility that I could ever be convinced that a God exists. It allows you the sort of open and honest exploration such that if in fact there were a God, you could become convinced of it and no longer be an atheist. This seeking for truth isn't a guarantee. You can be an atheist and not care about the truth at all. But if you pretend like you already have the truth, or you're convinced that you have the truth, what motivation is there to find the truth? If you think you've got the right answer, you stop looking. And what religions have done is pretend to give people the right answer, and it encourages people to stop looking for the right answers. And that gets us to the second thing that's wrong with the question. See, I would like to know what's true. I'd like to have my internal model of reality match reality as best it can. I want to know as many true things and as few false things as possible, even put it on a t-shirt. It's a nifty little saying, but it represents my goals. And we can have separate discussions about what is truth, or is there any truth, or how do we get to truth. But in the end, what we're talking about is I want to understand reality as accurately as I reasonably can. And for me, I would never have thought to ask, what does atheism offer? And similarly, I wouldn't have asked, what does Christianity offer? What does Buddhism offer? What does Scientology offer? What does Mormonism offer? These questions don't really enter my head because I understand that beliefs aren't a choice. I'm not going to get to choose which of these religions I believe. I could choose which one I participate in and which one I act as if I believe. But I'm talking about whether or not I'm actually convinced of the truth of the propositions. So I wouldn't ever ask those questions. My question is this true? Is it true that a God exists? Is it true that Jesus rose from the dead? Is it true that Jesus is Lord? Is it true that Xenu, the intergalactic overlord, drew people's souls into volcanoes, and now they're clinging to us. Is this true? That's the most important question for me. And I'm often confused by people who claim that they care about the truth, and yet when they ask questions, the questions betray that they're not actually looking for truth. When you say religion offers me these things, and what does atheism offer? You're betraying the fact that you're not looking for the truth, you're looking for a benefit. You are saying, what is it about this that would be beneficial to me? I either have cancer or I don't. It would be far more beneficial to me if I don't have cancer. Does that mean that I should believe I don't have cancer? There are people who are fine with that. This question comes up in a lot of, social thought games, party drinking games. Hey, are you the type of person that if you had a debilitating, a terminal condition, would you want to know? Or would you want to not know? Would you want to stay ignorant to that and keep going? The thing is, you can't claim to care and want to know the truth if your answer to that question is, I wouldn't want to know. And the benefit to me of my belief on whether or not I have cancer is irrelevant to whether or not I do have cancer. And what determines the value of my belief is whether I have cancer. So for example, let's say I don't want to know. Now the situation of me having cancer and not having cancer is identical until I'm overwhelmed by illness and it becomes clear that I do. And this may have changed had I known how I dealt with this situation. But if I don't have cancer and I'm just trudging along hoping that I don't, that can also increase anxiety and other things. I'm not making the case for whether or not you should want to believe or not believe, whether or not you should want your beliefs to match reality. I'm not talking about whether or not you should want to know if you have cancer. It's a personal choice. I can tell you why I think it's a good idea to know. But you don't get to claim that you care about the truth while simultaneously, clearly, only looking for what is in your interest with respect to the belief. Cancer is not in your interest no matter what. But what you believe about cancer, that's based on your interests. And my interests are in the truth. I'm looking for the truth because the truth matters. It matters to me, and it should matter to everybody. Whether or not you want to know the truth about any specific scenario is up to you, but my belief is that the more accurately we understand reality, the more truth exists in our internal models, the better we are at making decisions. And when it comes to what does atheism offer, on this question of religion, we know there are many different religions. We know they can't all be true, and yet they are all offering answers and explanations. And if you don't have enough evidence to tell which of them is true, then now you're in a position that is kind of like sitting at a table trying to put together a puzzle. And the one thing that you know is that all the pieces for the puzzle are there, whether or not you can tell right away or not. But there's also a whole bunch of other pieces to other puzzles. Pieces that aren't going to fit. They're not going to be part of the final solution. And in that situation, if you just pick up a piece and believe that it's part of the puzzle you're trying to solve, well, that's really beneficial as far as making you feel good. It's not beneficial at all with respect to solving the puzzle. If you pick up every piece and you say, this is not part of the puzzle, you're going to set it aside and not evaluate it. Atheism allows you to take the clutter of religious claims that are the extra pieces in the puzzle, or perhaps are the real pieces in the puzzle, and evaluate them without saying, this is definitely a piece of the puzzle, or this is definitely not a piece of the puzzle. More accurately, skepticism, properly applied, removing the bias of assuming which pieces are part of the puzzle and which one are not, is the best way to go about solving the puzzle. Let's pick up a piece, let's figure out, does this match the picture that we're trying to solve a puzzle for? Does it go anywhere in the puzzle? Which ones, when we pick them up, are, if the puzzle has no red in it, if it's a blue, green, black mess and it has no red, and you pick up a red piece, that one can be discarded pretty quickly, assuming it's not necessarily a misprint. But I think that's where the analogy might break down, because puzzles can have errors. But when we're talking about the truth, there's not an error. Something is either true or it's not. Something is either a part of reality or it's not. And if you begin by saying, I am going to start with the belief that these things, which I can't explore and can't investigate, are in fact part of reality, your ability to solve this puzzle may just have been completely demolished. Now, you might get the puzzle exactly right. So far, it doesn't look like that's what religions are doing. It doesn't look like that's what the God claims are doing. It doesn't look like it's getting us any closer to truth. But you'd have to acknowledge that if you actually want to solve the puzzle, the first step is not to make assumptions about which pieces belong and which don't. The truth about whether or not a piece fits the puzzle is in the demonstration that it is in fact a piece which is part of this puzzle. The time to believe something is after it has been demonstrated. What does atheism offer? The opportunity to not be wrong about whether or not there's a God. Because the position isn't, I'm absolutely certain that there are no gods and nothing could ever change my mind and this is the way it is and I have a secret power to get into the supernatural and bam. The position is, I am not convinced that a God exists. That's the minimal requirement for atheism. And not being convinced allows you to become convinced and removes the bias. That's what atheism has to offer, at least in this topic.
This video is made possible by supporters of the Atheist Debates Patreon project. You can find more information and add your support at patreon.com/atheistdebates.